Robert Duvall spent 2 hours in a hospital room with the one man in Hollywood who had made no secret of his contempt for him. He had not been invited. He had not been asked. When the man's daughter met him in the hallway afterward and asked why he had come, Duvall gave her an answer she has been carrying for 20 years. The man's name was Arthur Vance. He was 74 years old, had been a working actor in Hollywood for nearly 5 decades, and had developed over that time a reputation that was divided cleanly in two among audiences who knew him as a character actor of exceptional skill and reliability, and among people who had worked with him, who knew him as someone whose opinions about his contemporaries were strong, frequently expressed, and rarely kind. His opinions about Robert Duvall were among the strongest and most frequently expressed. They had appeared in a profile in a film magazine in 1983, in an interview with a trade publication in 1991, and in a longer piece in a Sunday supplement in 1998 that had been widely read and widely discussed among people who followed this particular corner of the industry. Each instance had been noted by Duvall's publicist and filed, and each instance had produced from Duvall himself exactly the same response, which was no response at all. The animosity had roots that went back to the early 1970s, to a period in both men's careers when they had competed for the same kind of roles, quiet, interior, morally complex men who operated without explanation, and when the industry had not been large enough in the specific niche they both occupied for both of them to succeed at the same rate. Vance had believed, and had said so in interviews over the decades, with a candor that people in the industry found either refreshing or exhausting, depending on their proximity to it, that Duvall's career had benefited from timing and from a particular quality of critical attention that Vance's own career had not received equally, and that this inequality was not entirely explained by merit. He had said this in print, he had said it in rooms, he had said it in the specific casual way that people say things they have been saying for so long that they no longer think of them as opinions so much as established facts about the world. Duvall had been aware of Vance's views for 30 years. He had not responded to them in print or in rooms. He had not, as far as anyone could determine, discussed Arthur Vance in any context at all. The asymmetry of the relationship, one man who talked, one man who didn't, had been noted by people in the industry who paid attention to these things and had produced in those people a variety of interpretations ranging from admirable restraint to simple indifference. The truth, as is usually the case with things that admit of multiple interpretations, was more specific than either. Duvall had read what Vance said. He had read all of it over the years with the attention he gave most things, carefully, without rush, without the performance of indifference that people sometimes put on to signal that they have not been affected by something that has, in fact, affected them. He had read it and filed it and continued working, and the filing had been neither forgetting nor suppressing, but something more honest, the deliberate decision of a man who had concluded that Arthur Vance's opinion of him was Arthur Vance's to have, and that engaging with it publicly would accomplish nothing useful for either of them. Arthur Vance was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles in the spring of 2007 on a Thursday, after a period of declining health that the people close to him had been watching, with the careful, helpless attention of people who understand what they are watching and cannot alter its direction. He had been diagnosed the previous autumn. He had continued working in the specific way that working actors continue working when they can, taking smaller roles, making shorter commitments, using the residual relationships of a long career to stay in the industry's orbit, even as the center of it moved further away. He had worked until February. He had stopped in February because February was when the body's opinion had overridden his own, with a diagnosis that his publicist described as serious, and that the people who knew him understood to be terminal. He had a daughter, Catherine, who had flown in from Portland and was managing the practical dimensions of the situation with the focused, exhausted competence of a person doing the most important and the hardest thing they have ever done. She had been at the hospital for 11 days when Robert Duvall appeared in the hallway outside her father's room on a Tuesday morning. She recognized him immediately. She was 43 years old and had grown up in the industry's periphery, not in it, but adjacent to it, which produced a specific and comprehensive knowledge of its inhabitants and their relationships that was often more accurate than the knowledge of people who were fully inside it, because peripheral knowledge is assembled from observation rather than participation and tends to be less distorted by investment, which meant she had a comprehensive and unsentimental knowledge of its inhabitants and their histories. "Mr. Duvall," she said. "Ms. Vance," he said, "I'm sorry about your father. I'd like to see him if he's willing." She looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone processing a situation they had not anticipated. "He may not want to see you," she said. It was not a refusal. It was an honest statement of a real possibility, offered to give him the chance to withdraw before the question was put to her father. "I know," Duvall said. "Would you ask him?" She went in. She was inside for 4 minutes. When she came out, her expression had shifted in a way she did not immediately explain. "He says, 'Come in,'" she said. Arthur Vance in the hospital bed was a diminished version of the man he had been. Smaller, the particular smallness of illness that has nothing to do with actual size. The face more lined and the eyes more present in the way that eyes become more present when the body around them is failing. He watched Duvall come through the door with an expression that was not warmth and was not hostility, but something in between that had no ready name. "I didn't think you'd come," Vance said. He said it without hostility, which was the first thing Duvall noticed, the absence of the edge that 30 years of contempt might have been expected to produce in an opening exchange. The illness had done something to the edge, or the Tuesday morning had, or simply the accumulated weight of things being near their end. Whatever had done it, the hostility was not in the room. "I heard you were here," Duvall said. He pulled the visitor's chair to the side of the bed and sat down. "How are you doing?" "I'm dying," Vance said. "How do you think I'm doing?" "I meant today," Duvall said. Something in the precision of that distinction, the refusal to accept the large answer when the small one was what had been asked for, seemed to catch Vance off guard. He looked at Duvall for a moment. "Today is a reasonable day," he said. "Yesterday was worse." "Good," Duvall said. They talked. This was not, at the beginning, easy. There was 40 years of specific history in the room with them, 40 years of one man's publicly expressed contempt and the other man's public silence. And the history was present the way history is always present between people who share it, as a weight that has to be acknowledged or actively avoided, and that acknowledgement and avoidance both require effort. They chose, without discussing it, to do neither. They talked about the work instead, which was the thing they had most fully in common despite everything else, and which turned out to be sufficient. Not about the history between them, not about the interviews or the rooms or the 30 years of expressed contempt and public silence. They talked about the work, about specific films and specific performances and specific moments in both their careers that one or the other of them had thought about and never had occasion to say out loud. Vance had opinions, as he always had, and he expressed them, as he always did, and Duvall received them and agreed where he agreed, and disagreed where he disagreed, without performance in either direction. At one point, well into the second hour, when the room had settled into the specific ease of two people who have said enough to no longer be entirely strangers, Vance said, in the particular tone of someone who has decided, in the specific clarity that serious illness sometimes produces, to say a true thing rather than a managed one, that he thought Duvall's work in Tender Mercies was the finest piece of acting he had seen from any American actor in the decade. Duvall looked at him. "You never said that," Duvall said. "No," Vance said, "I didn't." A silence. "Why are you saying it now?" Duvall asked. Vance considered this. He had the expression of a man thinking about the question honestly rather than reaching for an available answer. "Because I should have said it then," he said, "and because it seems worse, at this point, not to say the true things than to say them." Duvall nodded once in the way he nodded when he had received something and intended to keep it. "Thank you," he said. He said it without qualification and without performance, and without the slightly elevated quality of graciousness that famous people sometimes bring to the receipt of praise, which would have made it smaller than it was. He just said it. They stayed in the room for another 40 minutes, Vance tired in the way that seriously ill people tire, suddenly and completely, the energy going out of them without transition. Duvall stayed until Vance's eyes began to close, and then stood, and replaced the chair, and shook the hand that was resting on the blanket. "I'm glad you came," Vance said. His eyes were closed. "So am I," Duvall said. He walked out of Arthur Vance's hospital room at 11:52 on a Tuesday morning in the spring of 2007, and the hallway received him the way hospital hallways receive everyone, with the impersonal fluorescent indifference of a space designed for passage rather than arrival, and that therefore notices no one in particular. Catherine Vance was in the hallway. She had been there for most of the 2 hours, available in case she was needed and giving her father and his visitor the privacy the situation required. She looked at Duvall when he came out. She had been in the hallway for 2 hours, available in case she was needed and giving her father and his visitor the privacy the situation required. She had heard through the closed door the occasional sound of voices, her father's and another man's, in the particular rhythm of a conversation that is not argued but genuinely had. She had not been able to make out words. She had not tried. She had sat in the hallway chair with a cup of cold coffee and a magazine she had not opened, and she had let whatever was happening in that room happen without her management. She looked at Duvall when he came out with the expression of someone who has been at the edge of something significant and is still working out what it means. "Why did you come?" she asked. Duvall looked at her. "Your father is a good actor," he said, "and he's been saying so about everyone in this industry for 50 years except the people he had a problem with. I didn't want the last part to be the thing that defined the whole." He paused. "That didn't seem right?" Catherine Vance stood in the hallway of Cedars-Sinai and looked at Robert Duvall. "Arthur Vance's daughter is 57 years old now. She lives in Portland and works as a landscape architect and keeps her father's career, the films, the reviews, the interviews, the reputation, in a particular relationship with her memory that is neither idealization nor revision, but something more honest than either. She knows who her father was. She loved him anyway, which is a different thing from excusing him, and she has spent 20 years finding the right language for the distinction. She has told the story of that Tuesday morning to 3 people in 20 years, her husband, her therapist, and a journalist who was writing a piece about her father's career and who asked about the end of his life. She told the journalist the story on the condition that it not be attributed. The journalist honored this. He died on a Sunday morning, in the same room with Catherine beside him. He had been, in the last 11 days, quieter than he had been for most of his life, the specific quiet of a man who has said what needed saying and is no longer in the business of saying things that don't need to be said. Arthur Vance died 11 days after that Tuesday morning. His obituaries described him as one of the finest character actors of his generation, which was accurate, and noted his reputation for candor, which was also accurate, and said nothing about the visitor on the Tuesday morning, which was as it should be. Catherine Vance keeps the story close. She tells it rarely and carefully, in the way of someone who understands that certain things are diminished by too much handling. He didn't come to make peace, she says when she tells it. He didn't come because he needed something. He came because he thought it was the right thing to do, and he did it without asking anyone whether it was, and without telling anyone afterward. She pauses. That's the whole story. She pauses here, every time in the same place. That's pure Duvall. Catherine Vance keeps a photograph of her father on her desk in Portland, a still from one of his films from the late 70s, the one she thinks shows him most fully, the one where he is doing exactly what he was best at, without showing that he knows it. She has kept it there for 20 years. She does not need the photograph to remember who her father was. She keeps it because some things are worth the deliberate act of keeping. If this story reminded you that the truest acts of decency are the ones done without audience and without announcement, subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell. More stories about what it really means to be Robert Duvall are coming every single week.